When I saw multiple sponsored videos showing Sword of Convallaria, I thought it was just gonna be another gacha cash grab lame game, and while I wasn't right, I wasn't exactly wrong either. As a longtime lover of tactical RPGs, there's just so many things wrong with Sword of Convallaria that I cannot overlook. Regardless of any critiquing, I just want to state that I do enjoy this game, and at its best, I believe it's really enjoyable. The game takes this unique approach to its overall storytelling by essentially having a story within a story, and you experience both stories at the same time at your own pace, but not really. If that didn't make any sense, don't worry, it didn't to me either. Before I can explain more, I have to give a light spoiler warning. You die in the first 20 minutes of the game and go to a place between worlds called Elysium. You meet Cat Jesus, and the game sets you up to play what's called the Fool's Journey, a mode where you battle through past events of Iria to provide you, the player, with world context. The reason you would want this context is for when you play the Spirals of Destiny mode, where you'll make in-game decisions that can lead to vastly different endings. When putting it down on paper, it sounds like you're playing two games instead of one, and that would be accurate. If you don't care about the gacha portion of the game, I would suggest you skip the Fool's Journey entirely to play Spirals of Destiny. The latter is going to provide you with a more classic tactical RPG experience. With that being said, let's dive into the Fool's Journey. Like I mentioned previously, your character dies in the beginning of the game to set up the story for Elysium. Elysium is a space between worlds where you, as the Avatar, can go on the Fool's Journey to experience Iria's past. Along with this, you're able to return to moments in real life and with your experience shape the fate of Iria. The game starts you off with the Fool's Journey to teach you basic gameplay. Conveniently, this is also the gacha portion of the game. Oh look, 10 free summons, wow! The biggest compliment I have for the gacha section of the game is that it's really good at integrating gacha mechanics with the game in a way that doesn't make free-to-play players feel left out. Now, I've played plenty of gacha games in the past: Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, Disgaea RPG, Genshin Impact, Fire Emblem 3 Heroes, only a handful of you are gonna get that reference. With every single one of them, I did not spend money. This is because I like to see how far one is able to get without spending money. Also, I have no money. Now, this could have changed, but most of the games listed above suffered from an extreme lack of things for you to do once you were out of your energy resource. Sword of Convallaria, on the other hand, has a shit ton of things for you to do. It's also really giving with its stamina mechanic. You could spend hours in the Fool's Journey trying to burn stamina before you actually run out, and when you do run out, the game gives you bonus energy to use daily. This, coupled with the fact that you can spend literal hours managing characters and inventory, means that there's a whole lot to do here. Your characters have levels, abilities, and ranks, and so does every single piece of equipment. You have to manage them all separately with separate resources, which sucks. The thing that really sucks is that everything is level capped by your overall Voyager level, which is raised by consuming stamina. Because the Fool's Journey stages consume so little stamina, it takes a very long time to level up if you're only doing those. This is why the game introduces what's known as the Crossing Worlds. This is the game mode for farming resources and burning stamina. Unfortunately, the battles for this mode are lame and purely for farming. The good news is, once you complete a stage, you're allowed to do what's called a sweep, which clears the stage instantly at the cost of some stamina and varied resources. The bad news is that there's multiple ranks to these farming battles, so you'll still be doing them over and over again regardless. You go through all of this to receive the joy of leveling up every character and piece of equipment separately. I cannot say this enough, the game's overall system for managing characters and equipment needs work. If you're gonna have me leveling up the character, ranking up the character, leveling up the weapon, ranking up the weapon, leveling up the armor, ranking up the armor, leveling up the turrets, etc., you need to make it as painless as possible. There should either be an option for managing multiple characters and equipment, or auto-leveling should be a thing. Having levels be tied to the overall Voyager level is a huge detriment to the player because you're either leveling all this shit up every single level, or you're waiting a couple of levels until you hit a roadblock and wonder why your attacks don't do no damage. This was ridiculous, and I can only put up with it for about 40 levels. It really is the same thing over and over again. None of this would be a problem if it weren't for the fact that you have to level up to progress through the Fool's Journey, which means you have to do the grinding. This unfortunately ties the gacha mechanics we all know and love to the resource management aspect of tactical games. It's like watching two people that you know are toxic get into a relationship with each other. The fallout will always be catastrophic. Fuck man, it's just so awful. When you log into the game, you're assaulted with menus within menus and login bonuses. There's like 5 different player progression systems to manage, and I might actually be underselling it. If you're the type of person who receives dopamine from being rewarded for completing small tasks, boy have I got news for you. There's so many little checkboxes to check off, and every single one comes with a head pat. In all seriousness, there's some things worth completing and others you should probably ignore. I'd recommend doing the Voyage Memento because you'll eventually unlock the Tipsy Claymore Lady for free. My entire playthrough was done without summons, not counting the ones at the beginning. I enjoyed being able to unlock characters through the Voyage Memento system. Even though it was a lot of work, it was nice to eventually unlock Rawia and have it actually feel like a reward. Sure, I could have tried to summon her, but why do that? Now, if there's one thing I could point to and truly call the saving grace of the gacha mode, it would probably be the events. In the gacha mode, there's a constant rotation of events. Some provide solid battles and world building, while others are just fun to relax and mess around with. I am the Mushroom Adventurer. The best thing about the event battles is you can choose to complete them with a set of given characters or your own. There was this desert event that had you play as a character that was able to summon mercenaries. It was an enjoyable, well thought out system that added an extra layer of fun to the combat without breaking it. There were multiple ways to generate money bags that felt balanced. If the summoned mercenaries die in combat, they cost more money to hire, meaning you have to make careful consideration of where and how you use them. The levels feeling like they were crafted around this ability was really nice. Unfortunately, that's where most of the good things I have to say about combat stop. The combat in both The Fool's Journey and Spirals of Destiny are roughly the same, so what I'm about to say applies to both. Convallaria's combat is terribly flawed. The game just has way too many mechanics stuffed in without having a solid foundation. If you've played enough tactical RPGs, you'll see the cracks. I have a list of problems, not in any specific order, but let's go down it. 1. To start, the game has combat bonuses based on which direction an attack comes from, but there's no way to choose which direction you face. When repositioning a character, they'll always face the direction you move them. If you move them left, they will face left. If you move them right, they will face right. Back attacks do extra damage. This means moving away from enemies will almost always put you at a disadvantage, even if you have to. This shit right here was aggravating. The game also suffers from most characters having an extreme lack of mobility. Every class but one has a base movement stat of 3. To make this worse, you can only move then attack. You cannot attack then move. This makes the game feel very static at times. You have to choose between attacking or repositioning, which will always come at a detriment to you. I like that the maps are larger than what I initially expected them to be, but with such low movement it makes them feel like a hindrance at times. The combat just ultimately feels unbalanced. The game is supposed to be balanced by each class having a counter. Breakers counter defenders, defenders counter seekers, seekers counter breakers, and watchers counter destroyers. Destroyers do not counter watchers, but are supposed to have higher stats instead. From my experience, the watcher and seeker classes are the stronger of the 5. This is because watchers are typically archers and have the advantage of range in a low mobility game. Seekers, on the other hand, are the only class with a base movement stat of 5. This means they can run circles around the other classes. Not only that, but the recruited assassin, a seeker class, can tank better than most defenders. If you don't believe me about combat being flawed, look at what happens when you have an archer that can move after they attack. For these normal units, she is literally untouchable. The only thing that reins this in from being completely busted is that every stage has a turn limit. Another thing I find upsetting about combat is the preparation phase. This complaint is more directed at Spirals of Destiny. It just felt like every other battle would alter the enemy's starting formation. I would spend about 5 minutes planning out a starting formation just for the game to play some stupid story sequence and literally bring out enemies that are counters to the units I deployed. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you let me pick a starting formation if you're just gonna change everything anyways? It just doesn't make sense, man. Please, stop. Honestly, this game is always baiting you. There's an enemy range indicator that doesn't even account for the range of enemy abilities. When I realized this was happening, I angrily opened up my Google Docs to write down the exact moment I saw this shit happen. In Chapter 112 of The Fool's Journey, I did a battle on hard mode where I was angrily clacking away on my keyboard because that was the moment it became clear to me that this game has so much going on that it can't even keep track of it itself. If the game cannot keep up, how does it expect the player to? I cannot tell you the amount of times I thought I was safe only to get hit by the infamous foot snipe ability. Well, just read the enemy's abilities, I hear you say, but even that is a hassle. Navigating menus during battle feels especially clunky. When trying to read enemy ability descriptions, I struggled to even open them. You have to select an enemy, and then select their portrait in the bottom left corner to see their abilities, but it's super finicky, and sometimes the game will think you're trying to select a tile that's underneath the portrait, making you have to do it all over again. When you do finally get to the abilities, have fun reading the paragraphs that have coded words with their own paragraph explanations. I've got to be honest with you, at some point I just stopped reading enemy abilities because it was too much of a hassle. Unless it one-shots multiple party members, I don't care what it does. Oh. I feel like I've been really negative, so I want to talk about some of the positives. To start, I love the injured and dying mechanic. When a character's HP falls to a certain threshold, they enter an injured state, causing them to deal less damage and receive more. The dying state makes this debuff worse. This adds a nice layer of complexity to combat, allowing you to view health a little differently. I don't remember seeing this mechanic in a tactical game before, and I really like what it does for the game. It makes sense that when you're injured or dying, you can't swing as hard and are susceptible to more damage. A really nice touch. For the most part, abilities feel well balanced, with the game's resource for abilities being called energy. This is similar to Triangle Strategy's TP system, with the only difference being that some abilities also have cooldowns. I like that characters have a wide variety of abilities to choose from. As you acquire more skills for a character, their loadout becomes very customizable. Every character can equip up to 5 skills. There's the basic attack, a reaction skill, and the other 3 slots can be whatever you want them to be. My favorite skill types are the instant skills because they can be cast without counting as an action. You're even allowed to use an instant skill after moving. Then, if you still have movement left, you can move again, then act. I felt like this was really good for the game. I loved using the recruited assassin's hookshot to reposition enemies, then using the remaining movement to trap them in bad positions. I also enjoyed that Convallaria has more map objectives than just routing the enemy. Sometimes there's objectives where you need to reach a location, or maps where you have to go to multiple units collecting clues by following an information puzzle while avoiding being detected. These differing objectives helped shake up the game when it needed it most. Sometimes I would start feeling a little burned out from combat, then one of these maps would come around and be really refreshing. Another refreshing aspect of combat were the tactical point and backtrack systems. When doing certain actions like attacking from high ground or back attacks, you're awarded tactical points. You also generate tactical points passively. You use these points to cast special skills ranging from an orbital laser, movement buffs, putting the enemy to sleep, and all sorts of things. I wasn't sure about it at first, but decided it was pretty fun. I used it to bail myself out of sticky situations or speed up farming mostly. As for the backtrack system, I found it extremely forgiving. You get 3 backtrack charges, and you can literally backtrack to the first turn if you want to. I won't lie, I definitely used it a few times, especially when I wanted to experiment. To wrap up my thoughts on combat, I think there's a large amount of good and bad here. It's just that the game is so mechanically dense. I didn't even mention things like stage hazards or the fact that you can knock enemies off of cliffs. There's just so much here, and I think it's to the game's detriment. I feel like mechanics were being thrown in just for the sake of making combat more dense, not because they cared about how it would actually affect the moment-to-moment gameplay. With that being said, let's move on to the last and arguably best part of this game. In my opinion, this mode is the bread and butter of Convallaria. If you were looking for the more classic tactical experience without gacha BS, this is it. The moment-to-moment gameplay offers so much in terms of immersion. Before I get into all of that, I do want to stop to give a spoiler warning. There's going to be some spoilers as we go on, but considering this game offers a wide variety of endings, we probably won't even have the same one. You awaken a cold, damp cell with amnesia. Things escalate quickly as you realize you're about to be executed. That's when Raria, leader of the Sword of Convallaria mercenary group, breaks in to bust you out of jail. Along with her are her 2 closest companions, Mytha and Fei Kao. There's a riot outside, so you all decide to wait until the aftermath. You eventually make your way outside to find the streets filled with corpses. While making your way out of Wave Run City, you save a fair maiden from 2 rapey fucks. Then shortly after follows a series of battles where you meet up with other refugees and escape to the town of Convallaria. After some exposition, this is when the game finally introduces you to the other portion of gameplay, which is managing your units in the town of Convallaria. After proving your worth in Wave Run City, Raria decides to leave Convallaria in your assumed capable leadership. Things are handled on a week-to-week basis where you try your best to manage all of your resources. Being a mercenary means that quests are handled by way of a quest board. There's battle quests, dispatch quests, and event battles. I love that quests are on a timed basis with varying rewards. This makes you really have to consider what quests you do because you can only do one regular battle per week. Along with that, you have the dispatch quest. They usually require a specific class of character to be sent out. For the most basic quest, you'll be farming wood, iron, and gold, but you can acquire all different kinds of dispatch quests. It's nice because there's all of this variety for you to choose from, but limited resources, so you have to decide what's more important to. It's nice because there's all this variety for you to choose from, but limited resources, so you have to decide what's most important to you. Do you want to do the quest that gives you a chance at a legendary skill? How about fighting these bandits to get some weapons? Or you can do this infiltration quest to make some quick, easy resources. Early on, battle quests can affect your influence with certain factions, so you have to keep that in mind when deciding which quest you do. You probably should focus on choosing a faction instead of just doing whatever gives you a legendary skill. As weeks pass, quests will come and go. Just about every week there's an event battle that progresses the story in a direction based on your choices. When a character is used for a quest, it costs them 10% of their stamina. If they fall in combat, they lose 40% of their stamina instead. This is actually a decent punishment because when a character runs out of stamina, they become fatigued and can't be used for battle or dispatch. I really like this touch. It encouraged me to play out my battles a little less recklessly because the punishment sets you back just enough. If you need to restore a character's stamina, you can have them rest at the Haven. When a character returns from battle, they have to wait 1 week before they can rest. While a character is resting, they can't participate in battle. A neat thing I noticed is that characters that return from event battles specifically don't have to wait a week before they can rest. Resting only restores a certain percentage of stamina, and you can only have a few characters resting at a time. This creates a need to balance which characters you're using for which task. I feel like this part was really well thought out. Leaning too hard on certain characters can come back to bite you in the ass when you need them most. Moving on, there's a training campground where you can have characters go to level up and gain skills. You really should not underestimate the value of being the same level as your enemies. If a character is underleveled, they can barely do damage to a class they counter. Skill training can be hit or miss because you get to pick from 3 random skills, but this is after not seeing said character for 3 weeks, and you could potentially get 3 trash skills to pick from. I've had it happen. As you go through the game, you'll get these quest rewards called tailored trainings. Each character can have up to 3 tailored trainings, and with the right mix, a character can become pretty dangerous. Again, this is all at the cost of some gold and not being able to use said character. This is another system that'll punish you for leaning too hard on one character. The training can cost a fair bit of gold, and gold isn't always easy to come by in this game. I would consider the quest board, haven, and training ground the main things you should probably focus on, but there are other systems. You'll eventually attract a town witch who experiments with potions, and you help her out by using her potions in battle. I love the way she flies over the battlefield when you have her use one of her wacky potions. There's also a town forge where you can craft weapons. You can craft them from collected blueprints for special equipment, or you can do normal forging. I didn't start experimenting with forging until near the end of my playthrough. Honestly, I feel like the game doesn't give you enough resources to forge. I never had enough gold or iron to make forging for a random, potentially dogshit weapon worth it. But this is just another aspect of resource management. I chose to forego forging because it didn't suit my playstyle. Another system that did not suit my playstyle was the ritual thing. Characters that participate in a ritual are buffed, but it requires resources I didn't want to spend, so I never interacted with it again. I think it drains stamina or something like that. The last spot we have here is the tavern. Honestly, I love this place. You come here to recruit units, but honestly, the tavern is just a vibe. There's this Veldarian dancer with jiggle physics, a guy who's eternally slumped in the corner, and honestly, a lot of the game's most enjoyable exposition happens in the tavern, so I ended up really fond of it. Outside of all the resource management stuff, Convallaria has plenty of fun things tucked away in its corners. Merchants will visit different sections of the town, so it's good to be on the lookout for them. You can talk to NPCs for extra quests and cutscenes, and sometimes characters will ask to join the mercenary group. You can also visit the beautiful hill of Convallaria. The game really does sometimes manage to feel like a living, breathing world. As you live week by week, you write in your journal, receive letters from neighboring factions, and make important decisions regarding the town. The game just does a really amazing job of presentation and keeping you engaged. I would actively think deeply about the choices the game would ask me to make. It presented them well enough for me to care. There was a moment when a week started and the game prompted me with a choice. Due to all of the refugees from Wave Run City, the town of Convallaria was on the verge of famine. You had the choice to either wait it out or purchase extra supplies. I chose to get the extra supplies, which cost me 500 gold. At the time, this was a pretty hefty amount for me, but the benefit was a nice attack buff for all my units. You don't know when problems are going to arise or what's going to happen, but you have to make a decision. I really liked this about the game. Another thing I enjoyed about Sword of Convallaria were the characters. There's a really wide cast of characters that all feel pretty well written and unique. When a game allows me to make choices, I will typically try to pick what makes the most sense to me. With that, I ended up aligning myself with the faction of Iria because Dantalion seemed like a competent leader. He makes decisions based on cold calculation rather than feeling, but this doesn't mean he isn't willing to hear others out or admit when he's wrong. He really reminded me a lot of Benedict from Triangle Strategy, so it only makes sense that I ended up doing his route on a blind playthrough. There was a couple scenes in particular where he just really won me over.
一言言わせてもらおう。己を奴隷にしようと考えている国と和議を結んだところ得られるのは奴隷としての立場。それが徹底的な奴隷状態だ。
Even joke characters that are meant to be one note are enjoyable. There's this mercenary, Miguel, that goes on about mousetraps and mouse holes. I bet you this guy's favorite YouTube channel is Mousetrap Monday. Apparently, Rauia was his mentor at some point, and I'm sitting here asking myself, why is Rauia hanging out with the creepy mouse guy? Then I remembered that she day drinks, so it would make sense that she ends up with the occasional odd company. Let me tell you, if it weren't for the story and characters, I probably would have struggled to finish this game. The Spirals of Destiny gameplay is good, but I do have some issues with it. For one, the game really withholds letting you have fun with the story characters. A lot of the battles have guest characters, and while they're not bad, you can't control them. I had like 5 battles with Nurgle and Nungle in them, and I was not allowed to control them or experiment with their abilities in a single one of those battles. Look at how cool this flashy fisticuff combo is. Or when Nungal loads up her rifle for a turn. Yeah! Hell, even the lady that's on the fucking cover isn't in your party for most of the playthrough. Oh, and when I did unlock her, she was ass because her ability loadout isn't like the one they give you in the earlier gameplay. You have to craft her loadout to be that way by putting her in training for weeks to only maybe get the ability you need, which means you can't even use her for normal battles. Then she falls behind in level from no battles, so you have to send her to training again. Why am I even doing this? Another issue I have is battles constantly changing their victory conditions. There is a map where you're supposed to sneak around collecting information, but eventually the enemies catch on to the sound of your ass cheeks clapping and give chase. The map had markers for all of the locations I was supposed to go to, except for the final one that only shows up after you clear all of the others. The thing is, the enemies that are chasing you still get to go immediately after you learn this information. There's nothing really clearly hinting that this is gonna happen. I wasn't even allowed to backtrack, which sucked. It just ended everything right there. This isn't the only time it happened, and I bet the developers were thinking, wow, changing the victory conditions is so cool and dynamic. But no, it's not. It's annoying. Before I can move on to my final thoughts, there is one last issue I need to talk about. A part of the game that genuinely made me feel terrible. Also, I'm going to give a late game spoiler warning because there's no way to talk about this without spoiling some stuff. So my favorite faction in the entire game are the Veldarians. I love the design of their characters. The Veldarian Archer and Dancer were my go-to units for combat a lot of the time. So why did I pick the route where we trick their tribe into fighting the front line of a war while their remaining people get captured for slavery? Dantalion makes the promise of fair treatment to the Veldar, but ends up backstabbing them. I felt super bad for spending my time earning the trust of Veldarian people, only to be forced to cast them aside. Not all is lost though, because a merchant is willing to sell the captured Veldarians for 30,000 gold. This perfectly lines up with Dantalion sending your group to reclaim property lost during the war. The game sets up this amazing moment that actually feels like it has stakes. Are you willing to embezzle money to save the captured Veldarian people? Or will you stick to Dantalion's order and send all the money back? Me personally, I was willing to say fuck it, we're freeing the slaves. Unfortunately, the game had other plans for me. You see, there's portions of the game where you have to complete certain battles to fill up an objective meter. For the entire game, finishing the meter was all you ever needed to do to meet the objective, until this one time. Out of nowhere, one of Dantalion's Ambu Black Ops assassins shows up demanding 15,000 gold for the Kingdom of Iria. At no point does the game tell you that you need specifically 15,000 gold for Dantalion. What the game tells you is that you need 30,000 gold to free the slaves. Not only that, it doesn't even tell you when you need the 30,000 gold. So when I thought I might have time to make more money, the merchant showed up asking for the gold. I didn't have it, and you know what happened? The slaves were sold off to wealthy merchants, and any that resisted were executed on the spot.
And here's the contract to prove it!
I just don't understand why the game framed this scenario as if you were going to be able to deny giving Dantalion the money. There was no option to say no to the Hanged Man. This really upset me and ruined what would have otherwise been a perfect moment in the story. It had stakes, it had reasons as to why you could go either way. Are you scared of Dantalion? Are you scared your goth boyfriend is gonna beat you senseless for disobeying? Or do you not care and wish to right your wrongs against humanity? Or Fox people? This should be a hard choice, but it's not really a choice because the game expects you to make 45,000 gold without telling you that you need 45,000 gold. It's even more frustrating when you consider the fact that this game spends its entire runtime drowning you with information, and when you actually need it, it's not given, like, Listen, I know I've been harsh on this game, and that's mainly because they didn't offer me an early key or sponsorship. I need money. I feel like other reviews I've seen don't really talk about how the combat just doesn't feel concrete. It feels like it was an afterthought compared to the amount of effort they put into storytelling and the gacha portions of the game. I have no doubt this game could have been flawless if it had just spent a little more time in the oven. Despite everything I've said, what's here is amazing. Let's not forget that this game is free and highly accessible. Who doesn't have a phone these days? I would say if you're someone who doesn't play tactical RPGs, this would be a great place to dip your toes in. They may lie about the space needed to download the game on your phone, but the barrier to entry is low. The combat definitely felt like I was going through the motions at times, but that shouldn't stop a new player from having fun. Personally, as a frog who has to work 40 hours a week and pay bills, this game is not for me. I do not have the time or want to play two slightly different video games at the same time. It's insidious. On the other hand, I know if this game came out when I was like 16 with an iPod Touch, I would have been like, ooh! Convallaria seems like a game that's most enjoyed when you can give your life to it, and I just can't. Like the last 10 hours of my playthrough, I was expecting the end to be soon. Can you imagine 10 hours of thinking something is going to end soon? I think my biggest problem with Convallaria is that it feels like it doesn't respect the player's time, which I expect no less from a gacha game. I really wish there was more emphasis on playing the Spirals of Destiny. The game really pushes you towards the Fool's Journey when Spirals of Destiny is clearly the better mode. Despite everything negative I've had to say about the game, I think it's good. I love that it makes tactical RPGs available to a wider audience for free. I can see the importance of this game for the genre, so thank you, Sword of Convallaria. But also, fuck you, Sword of Convallaria. Well, before I go, I want to know, what do you think about Sword of Convallaria? Do you think it's good? Do you feel like all the sponsored reviews lied to you? Am I just a jealous, unsponsored bitch? Feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Later. Hey, do you want to help keep Corvy off the streets and stop crackheads from harassing him and his loved ones outside their front door at 5 a.m.? Well, go on ahead and hit that little subscribe button. Now, I know I've never been one to grovel, but here I am, doing it. Do you like it? Does this please you? Yeah!